Welcome to Chronicle Radio, where history doesn't echo, it speaks. Good morning, London, or what remains of it. The time is just past dawn on this second day of September, in the year of our Lord 1666. You are listening to a live transmission from the capital of England, where fire has taken hold of our city like a devil, let loose in timber and tar. A small blaze began in the early hours inside a bakery on Pudding Lane, and now, as I speak, the entire parish of St. Nicholas is in flame. Witnesses describe screams, orange skies, and smoke thick enough to blind a watchman. Households flee with what they can carry, some barefoot, some bloodied, some too late. I've spoken to men of the city watch. They say the flames are moving fast, too fast. Bucket lines formed but broke under heat. The Lord Mayor was summoned. His response, "A woman might piss it out." Let the record hold those words. We are tracking the fire's spread. But this is no common blaze. London's bones are old and dry, and the wind is hungry. A brief update, and not a hopeful one. The fire has leapt across Fish Street Hill. Wooden shops and merchants' stalls have gone up like parchment. Sailcloth and timber stacked along the lanes now act as fuse rather than good commerce. Even the river seems to carry flame. Barges have caught fire at their moorings. Panic spreads faster than the fire. Servants abandon estates. Carriages block alleyways. A boy was trampled to death outside Eastcheap, and as smoke thickens, a second rumor spreads like oil on water, that this is no accident, that Frenchmen or papists or enemies of the crown have set this fire deliberately. I warn all listeners, no proof has been offered, but already 2 men have been beaten in the streets. Pray for calm, and if you see fire above the rooftops, run west. Do not wait. The bell tower of St. Magnus the Martyr has fallen. A correspondent stationed at the London Bridge. Gatehouse reports the flames are moving with the speed of a warhorse, driven hard by wind from the east. Sparks have jumped the lanes, setting shops alight 3 or 4 buildings away. I repeat, St. Magnus is no more. Her great bell crashed through the chapel roof before melting into silence. The churchyard is gone. Only glowing stones remain. Londoners are now attempting to flee across the bridge, but with fire both behind and before, some have thrown themselves into the Thames. My own hands tremble as I speak. This is no mere city fire. This is a city undone. Let's hear from our co-host Julian Hoglin, who is in the Chronicle Radio studio in Paris, France. Julian, what did you hear?
From Paris, we watch with solemn dread. Anderson. What is happening to your hometown is horrible, my friend. The first letters from London arrived at court just moments ago. One, from a merchant's wife, claims all of Cheapside is ablaze. Another, from a priest near Whitechapel, writes, the smoke blots out our prayers. The French press is swiftly coyly. Already circulating headlines like the fall of heretic Babylon and England purged by flame. Among the clergy, some call this divine punishment. Among the nobles, there is fear that the fire will carry plague on its ash. One envoy asked me today, "Do you think this is the end of London?" I answered only this: I think it is the end of something. What rises from it, we shall see.
To all listening still, King Charles has spoken. A royal order has been issued to demolish homes and shops in the fire's path, create fire breaks, stop the spread. That is the command. But even now, many landowners refuse to see their property destroyed. Gold is a poor shield against flame. 2 citizens were hanged by militia this morning, accused of setting more fires. I repeat, hanged without trial. I cannot say if they were guilty. But I can say this. The rule of law is brittle when the air itself burns. The river stinks of smoke and blood. Some say the fire breathes, others say it weeps. But I tell you, it moves, and it does not sleep. We now confirm the fire has crossed into Cornhill. This district, home to merchants, bankers, and goldsmiths, was believed to be secure only 2 hours ago. No longer. A report from a city herald states that sparks leapt 2 lanes at once, carried on the back of this unholy wind. Several counting houses are now ablaze, and with them ledgers, coin stores, and bonds. The very memory of commerce, erased in flame. Men weep not for their wealth, but for the names of debts now lost. This fire is not just burning what we see, it is erasing what we remember. King Charles himself was seen today riding among the streets, his face marked with soot, his voice hoarse. He has ordered the Navy to assist. Barrels of water from the docks now flood upward toward the burning spires, but no stream quenches an inferno born of timber and wind, and yet still some kneel in the streets, praying, begging for a mercy that does not come. A breaking report just reached our station. St. Lawrence Jury has collapsed. The great church, named not for Judaism but for its location near the old Jewish quarter, had stood for centuries. It is gone now. The roof caved in, then burst outward like a dying beast. A witness described it as a furnace exploding from within. Rescue attempts have failed. One deacon, I'm told, remained inside until the end, singing psalms. He did not emerge. Anderson again here in London. To the soldiers listening from the outer wards. Please report whether Farringdon remains intact. We've lost contact with 3 northern parishes. Julian, are you still receiving this signal?
Yes, Anderson, still receiving. Word of the fire has now reached the Sorbonne. Scholars there debate the metaphysics of flame, calling this not an accident but a divine reckoning. Some believe the fire was foretold in the stars. Others, more grim, suggest the burning of London is the first of many, a punishment, a warning, a prophecy made flesh. A pamphlet is already circulating in the Parisian underworld titled London's Ashes, France's Inheritance. But not all here gloat. Many fear contagion. London's refugees, if they arrive by ship, will bring with them more than just smoke. They may bring the plague. The Seine is quiet, but the papers rustle like a coming storm.
We now speak of terror not from flames, but from people. 3 foreign tradesmen, believed to be Dutch, were seized in Leadenhall and accused of casting fireballs. No evidence was found, only their accents. They were beaten, then dragged toward the Thames. 2 were thrown into the water where the current took them. The third, I cannot say. His fate is unknown. I remind all listeners, fear is a flame of its own, and in times like these it seeks scapegoats. But justice cannot burn as blindly as fire. We lose more than buildings when we let fear steer the blade. Smoke has turned the morning sun to brass. The streets are choked, not with fire alone, but with silence, the silence of things no longer standing. We have lost over 1,000 homes. Entire alleys exist now only in memory. The fire court has been summoned early. They will decide which claims are paid, which losses are to be divinely accounted. But gold cannot rebuild what ash has taken. I met a boy just now, barefoot and coughing, holding the remains of a family Bible. Half burned, its spine still warm. He asked me, "Is this a war?" I had no answer. Breaking news. The fire has reached Cheapside. For those unfamiliar, Cheapside is not simply a street. It is the artery of London's commerce, the center of tradesmen's stalls, silk houses, wine cellars, and goldsmiths. The smoke is now thick with the scent of burning cinnamon, cloves, and spice, a bitter perfume rising from a dying city. One of our field scribes, Matthew Cobb, attempted to cross Milk Street moments ago. He was turned back by a wall of flame and bodies clawing at carriage doors. He writes, "It is not smoke that suffocates. It is the fear of never drawing a clean breath again. The bells of St. Mary-le-Bow are gone. Their iron frames bent, their ropes burned. The fire no longer moves westward. It stampedes."
Across the channel, fear grows in strange forms. Some here in Paris whisper that this fire is a sign of English vulnerability, that France might strike while her oldest rival is ash-covered and broken. But wiser voices see danger, not opportunity. A rumour spreads, perhaps born of superstition, that London's fire came not from man but from punishment, or prophecy. A Carmelite priest wrote today, "When cities burn, it is not the devil who dances, but the mirror of man shown back upon him." We have heard from Calais, they see smoke crossing the sea, and from Rouen, sailors refuse to dock near English ports. Anderson, the world watches, but not all with pity.
A second breaking update. The fire has leapt the breadth of Newgate Street and now races toward Holborn. A bakery there, unrelated to the first, exploded just moments ago after its barrels of pitch ignited. Fireballs now arc from one rooftop to another, carried by wind and fury. The Royal Engineers, in a desperate measure, have begun using gunpowder to demolish rows of buildings, a dangerous gamble. Several civilians were injured during one such blast outside St. Sepulchre's. A mother and child are reported missing beneath the rubble. Let the record show. We now destroy our own city in hope that the fire might be denied fuel. London burns by hand, and now by cannon. There are no more bells. I repeat, no bells can be heard in the city's core, either silenced by fire or shattered by collapse. London, once a city of sound, now howls only through smoke. An apothecary's assistant tells us the air itself carries sickness. Burning mortar dust, charred parchment, rat bones, leather, wool. The lungs choke before the mind knows why. I have moved further west, toward Smithfield, where refugees gather in fields. One woman lit a candle and began naming each child she could no longer find. Others began to pray with her, repeating only ashes to ashes, ashes to ashes. If this is judgment, it does not discriminate. I must confess, I am weary. But London does not sleep, and so neither shall I. The tower remains standing for now, its walls blackened but intact. The king's troops guard the royal armory, prepared to flood the streets with steel if looting worsens. We now have confirmation, over 2,000 homes lost, 11 churches fallen, 5 city wards entirely unrecognizable. And yet, a child was born this hour in a field outside Moore Lane. The midwife named her Grace. The mother wept, not for fear, but for defiance. She said, "Let her breathe before the smoke comes. Let us all. Night has fallen. But there is no darkness, only firelight. The streets are now illuminated in orange and black, like the heavens above have become a forge. The fire has breached Fleet Street. I passed it myself, running between fleeing citizens, and I can tell you, the buildings there fall like dominoes. The heat is no longer survivable within 20 paces of a blaze. Metal warps in the door frames. Iron signposts melt and twist like vines. Livestock run loose and screaming. Blinded, blistered, mad with fear. An old man collapsed beside me on Fetter Lane. He clutched a painting to his chest. It was not gold or a holy relic, just a portrait of his wife, he said. Gone 30 years. He wouldn't leave it behind. Anderson Revers here, transmitting now from within a merchant's cellar near Ludgate Hill. I've covered the grating with damp cloth, but the air is foul. I cannot remain here long. A crowd outside just sang a hymn. They sang it not to live, but to be remembered.
The fires of London have inspired both dread and poetry here in Paris. Tonight, in the Salon de Rohan, an entire room fell silent as a Jesuit poet read aloud a dispatch received by pigeon, a message charred and smudged, but real. It ended with the words, "We are not burned yet, but we are already gone." Let me speak plainly, listeners. Tonight, France listens to London's suffering not with scorn but awe. This is not a battle. It is not a war. It is something older, elemental, biblical. Our nation's ministers gather to discuss what aid may be offered, or whether this is the first spark of a greater European unravelling. I heard a priest today whisper, "The next fire may not come from heaven, but from man." Anderson, do you still hold the line?
Yes, Julian. Barely. We have breaking news from Westminster. The flames have crossed the Temple Bar. This symbolic gate, once thought an impassable line between the city and the West, is no more. The fire consumes without regard for law, tradition, or privilege. Even the inns of court, those hallowed halls of English justice, now glow like hearthstones. Paper embers drift into the sky like flocks of birds. Each one carries the name of a case, a law, a right. Now ash. A young barrister was found sobbing beside the blackened dome of Lincoln's Inn. He said nothing, only reached into the rubble for charred books. When his hands came back empty, he simply sat down in the smoke. We've received a call from a scribe in Holborn. The wind is not from the east anymore, it's from everywhere. God help us. Refugees now gather by the thousands in the open spaces of Moorfields and Clerkenwell. Makeshift camps have been formed. Families sleep under carts, or in the shadow of statues, or under church walls not yet collapsed. The cries of infants blend with coughing. A woman wails over a blanket. Beneath it, a body does not move. No one lifts the cloth. There is no bread, no clean water. A rumor circulates that the king will ride through tomorrow with provisions. I do not believe it, but I hope. Let me give voice to a letter just handed to me by a young girl, barefoot and covered in soot. She asked that I read it aloud. "Dear fire, we did not want this. Please go away. My mother says my father is still in the bakery. I hope he got out. I miss my dolls, I miss the pigeons. I hope heaven looks like Cheapside used to. I could not speak after she walked away. Another bell has fallen. This time it was St. Bride's. It struck the earth like a judgment. One of our messengers has returned from Southwark, across the Thames. He confirms the fire's glow can now be seen as far south as Dulwich. Entire hills light up as if the sun has returned at midnight, but it brings no warmth, no order, only dread. Boats filled with refugees now crowd the southern banks of the river. Some were seen fighting for space, pushing others overboard to make room for bundles of linens or caged hens. A priest was stabbed with a broken oar. An eyewitness described the scene as a city spilling its soul across the water. Julian, if you can still hear us in Paris, this city is not merely burning, it is turning against itself. I have just returned from the northern edge of the fire front. What I saw there is difficult to describe. Hampers Market, long considered safe by proximity, has vanished. An attempt to form a fire break by demolishing a dozen homes with axes failed. The fire simply leapt the gap, not over it, through it, a roaring tunnel of flame whipped by the wind like a living serpent. One constable dropped his axe and ran, shouting, "It changes direction! It chooses!" Several merchants attempted to protect their stalls by dousing them with vinegar. It only delayed the inevitable. Now their barrels smolder in the street, smelling like burnt wine and regret. Among the ruins I found a single violin string, stretched and melted, still humming faintly from the heat. That's all that's left of the city's music. A new danger now threatens the outskirts. Armed gangs. Yes, armed men, some with pistols, others with farming tools and iron bars, have begun roaming the camps outside the city's reach. They steal food, jewelry, and anything unburned. In some places they wear masks soaked in piss and vinegar to block the smoke. It began with looting. Now it's turning to rule. One camp near Islington was overtaken by nightfall. The leader, I'm told, claims he is a new Lord Mayor and commands loyalty in exchange for protection. Whether he is mad, opportunistic, or prophetic, I do not know. The fire is cleansing the city, but it is not choosing saints.
In Paris, the Archbishop has declared Sunday a day of fasting for the souls in London. A crowd gathered this evening before Notre Dame to listen to a public reading of one of your reports, Anderson. A woman fainted, another wept into her apron. It seems that across the sea, your city's suffering has become our sorrow, or our warning. A few whisper that the King of France should send ships, not sermons, but others say this fire is the hand of God upon the heretic isle. A playwright penned a line today that chilled me. England burns not for its sins, but for its silence. Paris watches the flame, but I wonder, are we watching our own reflection?
Breaking news from Smithfield, St. Bartholomew's Hospital, the last major refugee in the northern quarter, has been evacuated. Patients, many of them fevered, blind, or maimed, were wheeled into the street. Some could not be moved. They now lie, wrapped in wet sheets, as if water could shield them from wrath. One nurse lit candles and placed them beside each bed, then walked away. No one stopped her. What could we say? A man threw a brick at the fire. It shattered on the cobblestone before the flame reached it. That was his rebellion. And perhaps all of ours. There's no enemy here to shoot, no villain to condemn. Only heat, and silence, and collapse. I must pause briefly to tell you what remains. We speak so often of what has fallen. But let me name what still stands. The outer walls of St. Paul's Cathedral still rise, defiant and blackened. Its inner wooden scaffolding, erected for repairs, smokes ominously. But the stone resists, for now. The Tower of London, a fortress older than most empires, has not yet ignited. And the people, they still speak. They still carry buckets. They still hold each other. That, too, is something. I passed a man handing out apples from a scorched cart, saying only, "Take one, or I'll throw it to the fire." London may not stand by, mourning, but it has not yet knelt. Breaking. The fire has reached the outer edges of St. Paul's Cathedral. Smoke now pours from its southern transept, and the wooden scaffolds used in its repair have ignited. I stood with a group of monks and watchmen earlier as they formed a line to carry buckets. But the heat grew too intense, the air too dense. There is panic now in the square. People scream, "It's God's throne! Don't let it fall!" Others fall to their knees. Some cover their eyes. A young scribe tried to save texts from the crypt. He returned empty-handed, burns down his arms, repeating, "All the saints are gone. They're gone." If St. Paul's falls, London loses more than stone. It loses memory. It loses spine.
The Vatican has issued a public statement. Prayers are to be offered for the preservation of London's cathedrals and for the peace of its people. Here in Paris, I walked the banks of the Seine this morning. Two street preachers debated aloud whether this is punishment or parable. One said, "It is a warning for all cities, that no matter how high we build, the ash will always find us." More ships have been spotted off Calais and Dieppe. Some are said to carry physicians and food, sent unofficially by noblemen and merchants moved by the stories crossing the channel. No flag, no banner, just quiet mercy. If London is to fall, Anderson, she will not fall alone in history.
They tried. I must say that clearly. They tried. A final defense line was attempted near the junction of Watling Street. Volunteers used vinegar-soaked cloths, carried water from crumbling wells, and even ripped up cobblestones to make gaps in the fuel path. It held for 20 minutes. Then came the wind. A single chimney collapsed in a neighboring row. The debris launched flaming timbers through the air. One struck a volunteer in the back. Another burst through a cart of saltpeter. The blast could be heard all the way to Bishopsgate. The fire laughed and moved forward. London fights, but she bleeds from every brick. I have just come from the banks of the Thames, where hundreds now sleep in boats, tied to the docks or drifting just offshore. Mothers cradle their children in fishing vessels. Elderly men clutch heirlooms to their chests as if they will float better than gold. Some jump into the water and paddle beside rafts. Many cannot swim. A preacher screamed from a barge, "This is your exodus, the fire is Pharaoh." At one point, a larger boat refused to take more passengers. It was swarmed. I watched a man pull another down into the water by the hair. I turned away before I saw the rest. It is no longer about escaping the fire. It is about not dying alone in it. And so we mark the 4th night since the flames began in Pudding Lane. 4 nights. Thousands of homes gone. Entire districts erased. London, that grand mirror of empire, now looks only like shadow and ember. A letter from a child was passed to me by a Franciscan monk. It read, "Dear world, please tell your other cities to never leave their ovens burning. We are sorry. Please tell them not to forget us." The monk had no name. He only said, "Read it on the air." That's all she asked. And now I have. This is Anderson Revers, broadcasting live from what remains of Smithfield. Julian, we are still here, still burning, still London. We have breaking news, and it is perhaps the worst we've delivered. St. Paul's Cathedral has fallen. The great dome, that ancient crown of the city, collapsed inward just after midnight. Witnesses say it began with a groan, like a thunderstorm, then a burst of sparks that shot into the air like stars being born in reverse, and finally the whole of it, centuries of faith and empire, caved in with a sound like the end of a world. The fire danced through the nave. The roof split open like parchment. A choir boy was seen running barefoot from the wreckage, his robes aflame, shouting a psalm in Latin before he vanished into the smoke. All across London, church bells fell silent, not because they stopped ringing, but because there are no towers left to ring them.
This is horrible. A city's history being deleted right before our eyes. The priests here at Saint-Sulpice have draped their altar in black. The city's printers have already begun preparing pamphlets. The fall of the English crown of stone, they call it. More troubling still. A French naval scout returned to Dieppe early this morning, claiming that flames are visible now from the coastline. The English Channel glows faintly red at night. No one thought it could reach this far. Not by light nor heat, but by horror. They have started to call it le feu du jugement, the fire of judgment.
The fire does not rest, and neither shall we. I bring you a report from a correspondent in Whitechapel, or what remains of it. A militia of butchers and tradesmen there fought the blaze with shovels and vinegar, holding for nearly a full day before being overrun. Their leader, a man named Elias Merton, is said to have tied a handkerchief around his mouth, climbed a roof, and shouted, "We lived through the plague. We will not fall to flame." He died with his boots on, they say, facing the fire. A butcher's block still smolders in the square. A cleaver remains embedded in the timber. They didn't run. They stood, even as the city fell. Tonight I saw something I cannot forget. A group of survivors, around 40 people, gathered outside the charred remains of a chapel near Clerkenwell. They were not there to mourn, or beg, or resist. They sang, soft, low hymns, one voice rising after another, no conductor, no priest, just memory holding them together. A child drummed on an empty barrel. An old woman kissed her fingers and pressed them to a burned stone. It looked like madness, but sounded like defiance. A single man lit a candle and placed it at the feet of a statue, melted beyond recognition. Then he whispered, "If the city must burn, let it burn with song. The fire may take all, but not without hearing our voice. We end this hour with a truth you won't read in proclamations or royal decrees. The king has left the capital. I repeat, the king has withdrawn to Windsor." A statement will follow, but sources confirm he left before nightfall, citing the need to preserve the realm's continuity. I understand, but the people do not. At the base of the tower, a woman stood with her children, repeating, "He'll return. He'll return. He'll bring water." He did not. The fire has no crown, but it has become our ruler, and it answers no one. There's no longer a center to this city. The fire has become a ring, a devouring circle with nothing but smoldering ash in its heart. Reports now confirm that Cheapside, Cornhill, and Fleet Street are lost in full. The street signs have melted. The roads, once stone, are soft beneath the boot, churning like boiling clay. Masons are collapsing from smoke. Rats flood outward from the charred alleys and streams, chewing through sacks and hands alike. In Ludgate, I passed a man hammering nails into a coffin. "For who?" I asked. "For the old London," he said. And he kept hammering, even as the smoke curled down the lane like a whisper. Breaking report. Fire has breached the Tower Hill encampments. Thousands who fled early now return to find only flame where their escape once stood. The makeshift camps, stitched from bed linens and cartwheels, are collapsing under windborne embers. Smoke suffocates faster than fire burns. A woman was seen trying to drag her husband through the ash, but her skirt caught, and he chose to stay behind rather than slow her. She didn't look back. A child tried to run, dragging a dog on a rope, but both were overtaken. A nearby officer wept openly. "We don't need soldiers," he said. "We need sky." But the sky is black now. It no longer remembers us.
In Paris, we held a moment of silence at sunrise. Ships in the harbour rang their bells twice, once for mourning, once for memory. Rumours swirl that the English Parliament, or what remains of it, may attempt to declare martial law over what they call the sovereignty of fire. Strange words, but they reflect a stranger world. I've also heard that certain Catholic monasteries are preparing for refugee intake, though many believe few will survive the crossing. Not because of flame, but because no one knows who to trust in chaos. London's fire has revealed something ancient in us all, and it does not wear robes or crowns.
It is dawn, I think. A red light creeps through the smoke, not sunlight, but the reflection of hell on rooftops. A new wall of fire is moving from Moorfields into Shoreditch. The river is clogged with rafts. Some have begun to sink under weight or collision. I watch 3 men sword fight over a sack of oats, while children nearby sang lullabies to calm each other. A priest passed me with soot-black robes, holding aloft a cross that had fused into his palm. He said nothing. He didn't look at me. He only walked toward the flame. The maps of London are useless now. All landmarks have become guesses, all directions, prayers. A letter was found nailed to the gate of a half-burned chapel in Southwark. Written in charcoal on torn parchment, "To whoever finds this, we tried." We carried buckets. We broke homes to save streets. We sang, we prayed, we opened our doors. If you find this, know that London didn't die quietly. She roared. She wept. She mattered. That, I think, is the broadcast. Not the towers, not the bells, not even the fire, but the memory. The voice that says, "We were here. This is Chronicle Radio. And this was London." The flames have reached the Mint. Guards tried to hold a perimeter, not to protect lives, but to protect coin. Bags of currency were hurled into the Thames, now glowing beneath the ash like gold veins in fire. Some dove in after them. They didn't surface. Others, wiser or madder, began burning their own notes, chanting, "No value here! No value here!" A boy dragged a scorched metal sign across the square. It once read, "Bank of England," but it's warped now. melted into nonsense. People cheered as he held it overhead like a broken sword. London no longer trades in money, only fire, only survival.
From Calais to Rouen, the ports are now closed. Refugees who once sought safe passage from the burning capital are turned away. Ships anchored offshore send no signals. They are packed to the hulls with bodies, silent, unmoving. Whether they fled London or were denied entry, we don't know. Only that they drift now, like coffins on a tide. One merchant in Rouen told me, Paris will burn next. We close the gates now, while we still have the choice. Even here, the air smells of smoke. Even here, we know. What touches London touches us all in time.
Breaking. The fire has crossed the northern line. Camden, once a distant whisper in the city's fabric, now reports full structural collapse. Its famed market, gone. Tanners and potters evacuating with sacks of wet clay on their backs. Animals roam free. The bells of St. Michael's rang one last time, and then exploded. Civilians are fleeing north, but no one knows where to go. They carry everything. Tables, portraits, loaves of bread wrapped in psalms. Some just run empty-handed. One man walked by me whispering names to himself. Perhaps children lost, perhaps streets erased. There are no maps. Only memory now. And even that burns. A courier has just arrived from the Royal Navy, bloodied and barefoot. He claims His Majesty's forces have abandoned efforts to douse the flame and now prepare to fortify surrounding counties. Their goal is containment, not salvation. London, by all reports, is no longer a rescue mission. It is a perimeter. A line has been drawn. The capital has been offered up to fire, in the name of saving the realm. Word spreads fast. I've seen it in the eyes of the people. This slow realization that no one is coming, that the crown has turned away. They do not shout, they do not weep, they simply go quiet. I spoke with an old man outside what remains of a bookseller's. He held a scorched volume, The History of London's Triumphs, and would not let go. It was fused to his hands. He looked me in the eyes and said, "Tell them we were proud. Not clean, not noble, but proud. That is what we do here. Not broadcast for rescue, not shout for hope, but witness. This is Anderson Revers. Still ash-covered, still coughing, still London. We are not yet silent. And if you still hear this, if your city has not burned, let London be more than ruin. Let her be a warning. Let her voice survive. There is no more London, not as a place, not as a map, only as an echo. The streets are gone. The monuments are gone. Even the rats have stopped running. What remains is flame, and what flame cannot reach, it buries in smoke." I passed a group of boys near the Thames who'd built a raft from a door and barrels. They said they were headed for Rome. When I asked why Rome, one shrugged and said, "We heard they have fountains." And with that, they pushed off, vanishing into fog, into myth. They were London's last explorers.
In Paris, bells toll, not in celebration, but mourning. Streets are draped in black cloth. Priests have declared a mass for the fallen city to be held in Notre Dame this evening. The Pope has reportedly written a statement naming London's fall not just a tragedy, but a turning point in Christian time. A fire so vast it has erased hours from calendars and clarity from minds. But as the embers die in England, fear spreads elsewhere. The fire did not end with London, it began there, and every city now waits for smoke on its own horizon.
I have received a letter, one that was passed through 10 soot-covered hands to reach me. It reads, "My name is Margaret Winthrop. I lived on Shoe Lane. I lost my son to the flame and my home to the sky. But before I left, I buried a jar beneath the chapel stone. Inside it is our family's names, a recipe, and a joke. If you find it, please smile, even once. That would be enough." That's why we speak, not for survival, but so one woman's jar might someday be found, so one smile might survive a city. This will likely be my final broadcast. The transmitter is failing. The room grows hotter. I've moved twice in the last hour to avoid a collapsing beam. The microphone stand is fused to the table. My shoes stick to the floor. The wires crackle behind me like dry leaves in wind. But my voice holds. If you hear it, let it mean something. Let it say that even as the fire claimed all, someone remained to say, "We were here. We did not run. We did not whisper. We bore witness." This is Chronicle Radio. We speak across time, so that no hour, no voice, no city must vanish unheard. If this broadcast moved you, if you believe stories like this should live on, subscribe to this channel, share the broadcast, and help keep these voices echoing through time. Let London be remembered. Let every era speak. Let no century be silent. This is Anderson Revers, signing off.